Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video, I'm going to be taking a look once again at The Last of Us Part 2, and what I want to discuss today is specifically what in my mind is the single biggest failing that Naughty Dog had when it comes to the story of The Last of Us Part 2. And it's not just the story itself, it's the presentation and the order in which it was presented to us that I feel all lends itself to the issue that we're going to discuss today. And that is, I don't feel that Naughty Dog took the time or the proper steps needed in order to make us, the players, feel proper empathy for the character of Abby and to feel bad for her group. And I'm going to discuss some of the rather amateurish ways I feel like they tried to go about it. Some of these are pretty obvious. I want to discuss some of this stuff today because there's so much of the second half of the game especially, and even throughout Ellie's part of the playthrough, where they try to force you to feel bad at certain times, and it just ends up coming off as just a desperate attempt to cram this specific narrative home that you have to feel bad for Abby. You have to feel bad of what you're doing. And I'm going to explain to you why I don't think any of it works at all. Now, the first thing I want to discuss is the way that the game tries and fails to make us feel bad in non-story element ways, such as, this has been talked about a lot, when you are fighting against enemy NPCs and you take one of them out through stealth or whatever, you take an enemy down and they notice, the other NPCs of the group notice that you've taken one of their comrades out. Well, they'll start shouting out names like, "Oh my goodness, they got Sandra! Guys, Sandra's down! Oh my goodness, they've got Marco!" And we're supposed to suddenly feel bad for these completely non-essential characters that have nothing to do with the story at all, nothing to do with the plot. They're hunting you down. They're looking for you to kill you. If they see you, they're not going to be like, "Hey, wait a minute here. What are you doing here? Let's talk about this." No, they're going to shoot you on sight. How on earth are you expecting me to feel bad for killing enemy NPCs that are more than willing to kill me on sight just because you assigned a name to them? No, that's a rather pathetic attempt. And they talked about that so often during the marketing. "Oh, you're going to feel so bad." No, I didn't feel bad. This is something that we've done in every single game of this type for decades. Now, this goes back to what I feel the meta-narrative of the game is overall, which I discussed in my video yesterday, that we are actually the main subject of this game. But that's a topic for the other video. But trying to make us feel bad just by using a name on a character, that's not going to work. Same thing carries over to what they did with the dogs. They partnered dogs up with human NPCs as if they're a group, and if you take the human out, the dog will sit there and start whimpering. Now, the problem here is, in every game you ever play, dogs out in a combat area will, again, attack you on sight and will draw enemy attention to you. We have been trained as video game players for decades. You see dog, you take out dog. It's going to kill you if you don't. And again, in this game, if a dog sees you, it's going right for your throat. How do you want me to feel bad for shooting an attack dog in the face that's trying to rip my throat out? Because it whimpers? Again, dogs have been in games all the time. It's one of the biggest, most common trope enemies in all of video games is an attack dog. I can't possibly fathom how they expected me to feel bad because you have a dog throw an extra whimper out, or the owner goes, oh boy, oh, they got my dog." Like, again, this is just rather ham-fisted. It's right on the nose. Like, "Oh, don't you feel so bad? I mean, the dog whimpered before it died, or the person had a little gurgle coming out of their throat after you slit their throat." Yeah. Why am I going to feel bad? And again, look at it like this. Half the time, you can't avoid all of these encounters. Sure, you can sneak your way past some of the enemies, but there's several times throughout the game where, like, for example, I just went through the area again, I'm replaying through the game again, where Ellie jumps down into a basement and they start throwing smoke bombs at her. They know she's down there. You can't avoid sneaking past those enemies. There's other times throughout the game, there's set pieces where you can't avoid it. And even when you're out in the field in areas where you could theoretically sneak by everything, the second they see you, everyone's on your ass. And unlike the first game, Ellie and Abby don't have a stealth takedown that is non-lethal. This is another issue. They're trying to cram it home so fast. You remember in the first game, Joel had the option to strangle somebody and take them out. Ellie doesn't have that option. She only gets one button prompt, and that is stealth kill. That's all she's got. You don't have the option. They force you into this, and then they try to expect you to feel bad for doing what exactly they're forcing you to do in order to progress through the game. This is foolish. You can't try to hold a mirror up to the player and be like, don't you feel really awful about this? The stuff that we're making you do to play our game? Don't you feel so awful? This is so ridiculous. What's another way? This is another way they try to build empathy. And the co-writer for the game even said they tried to build empathy right out of the gates for Abby specifically as a character by giving her a fear of heights. And if you played throughout the game, you know that anytime she has to go across a bridge, or she has to cross a bridge, or she has to shimmy across a building that's falling apart, she gets really nervous about it. And she comments about it. Again, this is stuff that you have to do in games all of the time. And in order to make me feel empathetic towards this character, you're going to have to give her things to do or make her fear things that I already don't have to do in a normal game. How many times have I had to shimmy across a ravine or dangle over a ledge or do a rope swing in a game? I mean, the first time I can remember shimmying in a game is an old Tomb Raider game from about 20 years ago. Like, this isn't stuff that's new. Again, this is a classic video game gameplay mechanic that you have to do in any action game of this type. First person, third person, doesn't even really matter. Walking across a narrow log to cross a river. I mean, how many times have you done that in a game? How am I going to feel empathetic towards a character just because she's kind of whimpering like, I don't like this? That's not going to work. Again, something you have us do in every game. Just like killing dogs. Just like killing human enemy NPCs. This is not a way that's going to work to try to build empathy. But that's exactly what they tried to do. That was their method to build empathy. In fact, neither of the writers could even shut up about it. Every interview you do, they talk about how they're trying to go down that road. So now that we've discussed some of the non-story elements that they tried to invoke in order to get us to feel bad as a character, as a player, I'm going to discuss the problems that I have with Abby's story in particular and why I feel like the presentation that Naughty Dog gave us did not lend itself towards telling an empathetic story or to make me feel bad or feel sympathy towards Abby. See, right away they tried to introduce us to Abby and they gave us a little bit of a build-up. You played with her for just a few minutes, and then it turns back over to Ellie, and then we start seeing how things unfold at the mansion in the climactic scene with Abby and Joel and Tommy and Ellie. And what happens before that? Not much. We don't get to see much of the group. We meet Owen for a little bit, but we don't meet any of the other group that Abby is traveling with. Nora, Manny, Jordan, Mel. We don't see them until they're in this scene at the mansion with Joel and Tommy. So the first impression we get of all of these characters, aside from Abby and Owen, is not one of sympathy or empathy. And the reason why is because Naughty Dog didn't want to present this game as it should have been from Abby's perspective to start the game. The reason why, obviously, is because they're trying to sell us a video game. They want you to think, at least, that you're going to be playing as Ellie for most of the game. That's one of the reasons why they hid Abby during the marketing for the game. Although, as I think I've pointed out before, it is pretty ironic that they did tell us who Abby was 2 years ago, and then right before the game came out, they're like, oh, hush, hush, hush. She's a mystery woman. We can't discuss her. No one can talk about her in the review. You see, and in addition to the way they tried to present the deceptive practices in the trailers where they try to insert Joel in scenes where he didn't belong, that aren't actually in the game, tried to make him look older than he was to insinuate that he's aged out and that he wasn't actually, snuffed out in the beginning chapter of the game. They tried to hide all of that. And if they hadn't tried to hide all of that, if they had instead said, okay, let's take this for example. What if they never said anything about Joel and Ellie and tried to present it as if they were doing an anthology series? What if they said, okay, this new characters, new group, they have a new mission, And they just kind of kept the mission a little bit secret. Maybe they hinted at it a little bit. But let's say you just played as Abby and her group the entire game, and we had no idea Joel and Ellie and Tommy and the rest of Jackson were even in this game at all. Now, that would have been bold on Naughty Dog's part. Everyone's saying how bold the writing is. That would have actually been bold. But of course, that would have damaged sales. They had to use Joel and Ellie in the marketing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to hit their record-breaking sales, no, the figures that they got, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. So they had to sell us on Joel and Ellie. Whereas if they had gone with an anthology style and then progressed from, say, Seattle, and we know this group, they're on a quest, they're out hunting somebody, but we don't know who they are, and then say halfway through the game, then they present, then Owen's like, Abby, come here, I got something to show you, and they come up on Jackson, and then you realize, oh, they've been hunting Joel this whole time. But this would have given Naughty Dog a chance to flesh out these characters and to build up a reservoir of sympathy for them. We would have felt more empathy towards what they were going to do next at that point. Instead, by shoving it into the very first chapter of the game, you put all of these characters in a deficit. You put them all in a sympathy hole, as it were. They have to dig their way out and prove to the audience that they're worth feeling empathy for. And all through Ellie's playthrough, what do we see? You have a character like Nora, making the little comment about Joel, like, yeah, I remember him. I remember that little bitch screaming. And then she takes off running. And then you're supposed to feel bad for her later? No. Later on, you only get a couple minutes with her, with some character building, and a quick scene, really, with Abby later on in the game. And that is supposed to help make us feel bad and sympathize with Abby? It's not going to work. You want me to feel bad for what happens to Mel when Mel is one of the most unlikable characters I've seen in any game in a long time? Just a miserable wet blanket in every scene. I'm not going to feel so bad about her, especially, again, when she was present at the initial scene with Abby and Joel. Same thing with Manny. Same thing with Jordan. Jordan's a completely unlikable character. I accidentally said his name was Danny in my initial review, but the character Jordan. What about him is a likable character? The last we see of him is kicking Ellie in the face, and then he tries to kill Dina later on in Seattle. Just choke her out right in front of us. When they got Ellie tied up in a chair ready to kill her. Jordan was getting ready to torture Ellie to get information. So again, how am I going to feel bad for killing this character and sympathize? How am I going to feel bad about Manny? Manny's he's got a little bit of charisma, a little animal magnetism, but if you've ever been around a guy who just spends all day talking about his conquest from the night before, it's not really a guy you want to hang around with every day. Might be fun for a little bit, once in a while, to hear a guy bragging about himself all the time. Guys like that are a character, but Manny is not a guy I'm going to feel sympathetic for. He's kind of just a blowhard who boasts about himself all day long. Not a sympathetic character. Then you got Owen. Yes, Owen. Owen's the big one, the one we're really supposed to feel bad about. Except, he's just generic good guy character number one. He is the Jesse counterpart. He is Abby's version of Ellie's Jesse. Just a complete blank slate, does nothing but, hey, I'm a good guy, let's make good decisions and be good, and let's also be really good. They get walked over by the other characters in the game. When they die, it almost goes unnoticed. Especially Jesse. I mean, Jesse goes down and is like, oh, yeah, he was a character. I mean, both of them pretty much just serve in order to create a pregnancy to add to the drama. That's both Owen and Jesse, both. Oh, pregnancy on one side, pregnancy on the other. It's a complete mirror image for the two characters of Ellie and Abby. Because they just want to, look how is the duality of it. Look, they're mirroring each other. It doesn't work though. Because like I said, when you start out Abby and the rest of her group in the scene that you start them out as, we're not going to feel bad for them. At best, by the end of the game, where Ellie walks up on Abby and Lev at the beach, and they're hanging there, just waiting to die. Again, they're like, are you going to feel bad now? They've been held captive. Look how abused they've been. Now you're going to feel bad. Now you're going to feel bad. Now you're going to feel bad. Again, story just trying to hammer you in the face with the bluntest of objects while simultaneously people are acting like this is just some great insightful writing. It's like, no, you're beating me in the head with a sledgehammer with your message here, and it's completely taking me out. The fact that you're trying so hard to force this empathy means that I'm feeling no empathy. And it is funny too. I see people saying, I just feel bad. I feel bad for you because you just can't feel empathy with these characters. Come on. I've played a lot of games that have gotten me emotional. I've played plenty of games where I've shed a tear or two. The Last of Us Part 2 wasn't one of them. In fact, the first game was. In a couple of different scenes. Last of Us Part 2, nothing. I sat there stone-faced. Or, not even that, rolling my eyes at some scenes because they were trying so hard. Rolling my eyes like, oh my goodness, they got John! The NPCs. The dogs whimpering. Abby freaking out about heights where, you know, again, stuff that we as a player, these are things we do all the time. And again, I'll reference the video I did yesterday talking about the meta-narrative of what I feel the game's really about, but that's neither here nor there. The fact is, well, at least in my opinion, it's not really a fact, but in my opinion, they did not do a good job in any way, shape, or form of building Abby's character out. If they would have presented us with a twist in the middle of the game, and then we start playing as Ellie later, if they would have been bold enough to do that, if they actually had the courage that they claim they do with their writing, maybe they could have done that and sacrificed a little bit of sales, and then maybe, here's another thing. Think about it from this angle. The marketing for this game could have been totally different, and you wouldn't have had any backlash before the game launched if nobody knew that Joel and Ellie were even in the game. But the fact that we knew that they were, and the fact that the marketing heavily relied on it, and then when those leaks came out, boy, the dam just burst wide open, didn't it? And then you got a bunch of backlash. What if this had happened and nobody knew, and Joel and Ellie were just shockingly in the game? Can you imagine the buzz that would have created? The back-end sales would probably have made up for any initial sales lost, I would imagine, if it got out that, oh my goodness, you have to play this, there's a huge twist in the middle, nobody would actually talk about it, I would imagine. And again, if it didn't happen right at the beginning of the game, I don't think you would have felt so many people get turned off in those first hours. Some people bought the game going in full good faith, no problem at all, got to that scene and said, what? I work with a guy, and he didn't want to know anything about the game. And he bought the game, and then he came in on Monday morning this past week. He's going, dude, what the hell? And I'm like, hey, you didn't want to know anything about the game, so there you go. That's what I feel a lot of people went through. They bought the game with the best of intentions, based on the marketing, and based on the fact that they loved the first game. And then this happens. Anyway, that's kind of just how I feel about the story, and it's just a little bit of how I would have done things differently. They could have told basically the same story if they just would have presented it in a different manner. But they chose not to do that. They chose, I feel, to be a lot more safe than they should have and make you play as Ellie throughout the first half of the game. I think that was a bad decision for the story. For the player, sure. Yeah, I'm Ellie. Here we go. Yeah. I like this. Here we go. I'm Ellie. I'm back in the saddle playing Last of Us. I get it. I know why they did it from a decision standpoint, but I don't feel it in any way served the narrative. And for a game that people are hyping up as if it's the most grandest masterpiece of video game writing they've ever seen, I'm sorry. The presentation right there killed it for me. And that's just the bottom line. Anyway, that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.